Okay, picture this. You get a letter, not just any letter, but an urgent message from the person you look up to most in the world. And inside, it's not just encouragement, it's a mission, a charge that's going to define your future. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into with the first chapter of First Timothy. Let's unpack this thing.
You know, this isn't just some ancient piece of mail. This is a strategic briefing. It's a playbook for a young leader who's been dropped right into a seriously tricky situation. The stakes couldn't be higher, the opposition is clever, and the instructions, well, they have to be followed to the letter.
Every great story kicks off by introducing the main characters, right? And this one starts with the greeting that right away shows you who's in charge and just how close the relationship is between these two men.
So let's jump right into verse 1. Paul doesn't start with, "Hey, it's your friend Paul." Nope, he opens as an apostle by the commandment of God. He's basically saying, listen up, what I'm about to tell you isn't my opinion. You can almost see a royal decree being stamped with a hot wax seal. This thing carries divine weight. It's not a suggestion, it's an order.
Then, in verse 2, the whole tone just flips. It goes from official and authoritative to deeply, deeply personal. The letter is for Timothy, a true son in the faith. I mean, you can just feel the warmth in those words. This isn't a general writing to a soldier anymore. This is a father speaking directly to his son, wishing him grace, mercy, and peace.
So after that warm, personal opening, Paul gets straight to the point. This letter has a very specific purpose, and it's a dangerous one. It's time to deal with a threat that's growing from inside the church. Verse 3 lays out the mission loud and clear. Timothy's orders are simple. Stay put in the huge, influential city of Ephesus and charge some that they teach no other doctrine. Just imagine a map for a second. Paul is heading off to Macedonia, but he points a firm, trusting finger right back at Ephesus, leaving Timothy there to hold the line. So what is this false teaching all about? Well, verse 4 calls it fables and endless genealogies. Think of it like a screen just filling up with tangled, chaotic threads that go absolutely nowhere. And these weren't just bedtime stories. In that culture, these complicated family trees were a source of huge arguments and pride, and they were pulling people away from what really mattered, faith. Now, in total contrast to all that chaos, verse 5 shows us the goal of true teaching. Picture a single glowing heart, and out of that heart come three clear, steady beams of light. One is labeled love, the next pure heart, and the third, sincere faith. That's the target. It's chaos versus clarity. So here's the bottom line. You've got two different paths with two very different outcomes. Verse 6 tells us that the people chasing all those distractions have strayed into idle talk. And verse 7 is the real kicker. They want to be known as teachers of the law, but they literally don't understand what they're talking about. All they create is confusion and arguments, while God's way, that builds love and sincerity. Now, it might sound like Paul is kind of down on the law here, but he's not at all. He's about to make it super clear that while these false teachers are totally misusing it, the law itself has a very specific and very good purpose. So that begs the question, right? Who is the law actually for? Well, verse 8 sets the stage. It says the law is good, but only if you use it the way it was meant to be used. It's not some tool for endless debates, it's a tool to confront evil. And this is where we see what the law's true targets are. Verse 9 starts this powerful rhythmic list. The law is for the lawless and insubordinate, the ungodly and for sinners, the unholy and profane, for murderers, fornicators, and verse 10 just keeps going, kidnappers, liars, and perjurers. With every single word, just picture a spotlight snapping on, hitting a specific act of rebellion. That's what the law was made to expose. And then in verse 11, Paul ties it all together. This sound doctrine, this correct way of seeing the law, it lines up perfectly with the glorious gospel that God himself entrusted to Paul. Imagine a brilliant, shining scroll being handed down right from heaven into Paul's hands. That's the precious cargo he's protecting. And to prove just how powerful that gospel is, Paul does something amazing. He stops talking about ideas and theories and makes it intensely personal. He puts his own life story on display as Exhibit A of God's grace.
This is Paul's life in a nutshell, straight from his own words. Verse 12 starts with him thanking Jesus for considering him faithful enough to put him into the ministry. But then in verse 13, he doesn't pull any punches about his past. He calls himself a blasphemer, a persecutor, and an insolent man. But then comes the turning point. Verse 14 says God's grace was exceedingly abundant. And why? Verse 16 tells us he was shown mercy so he could become a pattern, a living, breathing example of God's grace for everyone else who would ever believe.
And that brings us to verse 15, probably the most famous verse in the chapter and the heart of the entire gospel. Paul says, Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. And get this, he doesn't say I was the chief, he says I am. It's this incredible statement of ongoing humility, a constant reminder of just how much grace he'd been given.
After remembering just how far he'd come, Paul just can't contain himself. Verse 17 is this spontaneous explosion of praise. You can just feel him looking up to the heavens, totally overwhelmed, as the camera zooms out to this majestic, cosmic scene of pure light and glory. He's just giving all the honor to the God who saved him.
And you know, that personal story wasn't a sidetrack, it was the fuel. Paul brings the focus right back to Timothy, using his own life as the foundation for the final command he's about to give.
So in verse 18, he says it again. This charge I commit to you, son Timothy, wage the good warfare. This is the passing of the torch. Picture Paul's own weathered, battle-tested hands placing a shining Roman helmet on Timothy's head. He's not just encouraging him, he's equipping him and sending him into the fight. And what are Timothy's main weapons in this fight? Verse 19 tells us, faith and a good conscience. But then Paul gives this chilling warning about people who have thrown those things away. He says they have suffered shipwreck. Just imagine a huge, powerful ship, that's someone's faith, being smashed to pieces against dark, jagged rocks in a storm. That's what happens when you abandon a good conscience.
And to make sure this morning really hits home, verse 20 actually names names, Hymenaeus and Alexander. These aren't just stories, they're real people. Paul says he delivered them to Satan, which was a really severe form of church discipline, basically excommunication. The hope was that this drastic measure would teach them the seriousness of their blasphemy. The warning is real and it's personal.
And so, this mentor's playbook ends by passing that charge on. Paul gave it to Timothy, and now the challenge lands with us. It's a mission to hold on to truth, to fight for clarity in a world of chaos, armed with faith and a good conscience. So the only question left is, will you fight the good fight?